And joining me right now is Daniel Cameron, former Attorney General for the Commonwealth of Kentucky and also a Republican nominee for governor. And Daniel Cameron, welcome back, and this time talking with us about your interest in becoming the next U.S. Senator.
Mario, it's always good to be with you, and I'm excited about this race for the United States Senate, and thanks for having me on to talk about it.
Absolutely. Let's talk. I know that minutes after Republican Senator Mitch McConnell announced his decision to not seek re-election, you announced very quickly that you're running for the seat. Tell us in a sentence or two, because we'll talk about your priorities, but in a sentence or two, why you've decided to jump into this race to represent Kentucky in the U.S. Senate.
Well, I believe Kentucky needs a strong leader in the United States Senate that's going to stand up for President Trump's America First agenda. I believe we need somebody that reflects the values of the men, women, and children of all 120 counties, and that's why I decided, with the support of my wife, Mackenzie, which you know is very important to me, that's why we decided to jump into this race, because we want to see leadership, again, in the Senate that is going to support that America First agenda and is going to articulate the principles and values of Kentucky in the Senate.
And I know also too, in your one of your announcement videos that you shared, you talked about Mitch McConnell and his recent no votes against 3 of President Trump's cabinet picks, and you actually said, quote, you felt that was just flat out wrong. Tell us why you believe that.
Well, look, I think that when it comes to Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, and RFK, I would have voted differently, and I just wanted to make sure people were aware of that. But this is very much a campaign about the future. This is a campaign about, the folks here in Kentucky want to know, as the next senator from this Commonwealth, are you going to support President Trump? Are you going to tackle and help tackle inflation? Are you going to help secure our southern border? And I've got a track record of standing up for the constitutional rights and values of Kentuckians. And again, it's not just talk for me, it's about action. As Attorney General, I stood up to a governor that tried to shut our churches down to protect our First Amendment rights. I sued the Biden administration when they failed to secure our southern border. And I was the first Attorney General in the nation to stand up and openly oppose ESG and say that if you are a pension board member, that your focus has to be on the pension beneficiary, teachers, police officers, instead of these ideas related to ESG. And I've been a vocal opponent of DEI. And again, I want to go to the United States Senate, help Kentucky preserve our values, fight for constitutional rights, and make sure that we are promoting and supporting the America First agenda.
And we'll talk about those in just a moment, but I do want to ask you one last question related to Mitch McConnell. I know that many people are aware that you were part of the McConnell Scholar Program. Obviously, at one point was with the Senator's legal counsel, but also very close ties to Mitch McConnell, and share that you were proud to call him a friend and was a mentor at one point. Here in 2025, do you still consider Mitch McConnell, a friend and a mentor still as you plan your race for this Senate race?
Yeah, look, there's nothing wrong with having policy differences. And I expect that the people at home want to know where I stand on the policy issues. And I think it's important for the listener and the viewer to know that I'm going to be a senator that reflects and represents your values. And I've made it painstakingly clear that this is not about personalities. This is about policy. And when it comes to policy, I have time and time again shown that I'm my own man. And that's what this race is about articulating those principles, standing up for the men and women, the hardworking men and women of this Commonwealth. And I'm going to do that daily in the United States Senate. And I'm going to support President Trump's agenda. Look, I was the first, Mario, you might recall, I was the first statewide elected office holder in Kentucky to endorse President Trump for re-election. It's because I believe in the America First agenda, I believe in him, and I believe in the virtues of the Republican Party. But at the end of the day, this is about the hardworking men and women of this great Commonwealth. And it would be a great honor for me to go to Washington and fight daily on your behalf to preserve our constitutional rights and to make sure you have someone in the Senate that is supporting President Trump's America First agenda.
Now, if elected to the U.S. Senate, obviously there's a long time before the primary actually begins or the voting begins next year. But if you were elected after the general election next year, what would be your first piece of legislation that you'd want to introduce as a U.S. Senator, and why?
Well, I think the big thing for me is one, to support the America First agenda, but two, work alongside the administration to continue to take out, root and branch any vestiges of the DEI programs that the Biden administration tried to institute. I also think it's important to work alongside the administration to fight illegal immigration at the southern border. Again, I've got a track record of doing this as Attorney General. This is a personal issue for a lot of Kentuckians. We have seen too many of our brothers and sisters and too many of our children succumb to opioid abuse and overdoses. And you need leadership in the Senate that is going to beat the drum of making sure that dollars are staying in this country to fight to end the opioid epidemic, and particularly here in Kentucky. And so I'm going to make sure that that happens as the next senator from this great Commonwealth.
I know that there's a lot of people who are talking about inflation across the country, but of course here in Kentucky, many polls out there, some of the data markers show that inflation is the number one issue that people are experiencing. What could you do as a U.S. Senator to help curb inflation in America?
Well, I think the United States Senate is starting on that good work now with ensuring that we cut people's taxes. I mean, it's incredibly important that you have, at the end of the day, more money in your pocket to help you buy groceries, to buy gas. The Trump administration recognizes that, and we want to preserve those Trump tax cuts. And we also want to make sure that again, at the end of the day, there's more money in your pocket. I believe that whether it's a mother in Pike County or a father in Paducah, wherever you might live, you care about having more money in your pocket. And as a senator from Kentucky, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that you have more money in your pocket.
I know that President Donald Trump has actually proposed the abolishment of federal income tax. Instead of taxing U.S. citizens, has shared that he wants to tariff and tax foreign nations. What's your position on that?
President Trump has wisely said that he doesn't want the United States to be taken advantage of anymore. And I agree with him. We have got to be tough and strong when it comes to our adversaries, and frankly, when it comes to having frank and open and honest conversations with our allies about no longer taking advantage of the generosity of our nation. We've got to have equal playing field when it comes to taxes on overseas goods and imports. And I want to make sure that as a partner to President Trump, I'm supporting his agenda. I'm supporting the people here in Kentucky such that we aren't being taken advantage of by folks overseas.
I want to transition to talk about foreign affairs. I know you've talked recently about Ukraine and what's happening with the ongoing war with Russia. The U.S. obviously and its allies for 2 years have been sending weapons and money to Ukraine. Where do you stand on continuing with assistance for Ukraine?
Well, I think it's important to prioritize Kentucky and this country. And I think that, as I've said before, we've really got to reevaluate sort of where we're sending money, because there are people, whether it was hurricanes or other natural disasters. I mean, how many stories have we heard from folks in eastern Kentucky or other parts of this Commonwealth and across this country that feel like they have not been heard or had their concerns addressed when it's come to some of these natural disasters that have occurred. So we need to take care of the people in our own country and prioritize them over sending money overseas, and in particular Ukraine. Look, we've sent a lot of money there, and I recognize, obviously those decisions have been made. But as a United States Senator, I want to focus on Kentucky and this country before we focused on Ukraine.
What about the Israel-Hamas war? I know that's also been ongoing for several years. There's been talks of trying to officially have a ceasefire, but tens of thousands of lives have been lost since that war has started. Do you support the level of support that U.S. has been giving to Israel so far during this process?
Yeah, Israel is a strategic partner in the Middle East, and we need to make sure that we continue to support them. They are under siege, and as an American, as someone who believes in supporting Israel, we certainly have to continue that. Again, it's not only in our best interest as a strategic partner in the Middle East, but also as a personal matter. I mean, as a Christian, this is important to me. And so we need to continue to support Israel. Again, this is a strategic partnership in the Middle East. That place needs all the help that we can give them.
I know you mentioned moments ago about natural disasters, and also Eastern Kentucky is known for their issues with flooding, but also Western Kentucky tornadoes. FEMA has been a long discussion point recently with how they are providing federal assistance to the country, but also here in Kentucky. But the administration has started terminating hundreds of staff at FEMA. What's your position on how it relates to FEMA, and how, should there be more restructuring with that, or do you think that is important to preserve as it is?
Well, FEMA, I think in many ways, as President Trump and others have talked about, has failed a lot of our citizens. Look, I heard from people a lot during some of the disasters that we saw in Kentucky that FEMA literally was coming to homes and giving pennies on the dollar. And I think it's frustrating. I think it certainly needs to be looked at. Look, ultimately, when it comes to the Trump administration, for a long time, conservatives in particular have talked about cutting government and finding waste, fraud, and abuse. And I appreciate President Trump working on this alongside others to find waste, fraud, and abuse, and I applaud those efforts. And then when it comes specifically to FEMA, again, if you talk to folks in West Kentucky or Eastern Kentucky, they will tell you that they're not satisfied with some of the ways in which FEMA tried to address or give money related to the harm and damage that was done to homes. I mean, it was, again, pennies on the dollar. And so it needs to be evaluated, and I appreciate President Trump doing that.
And as we get ready to wrap up with you, just a few more questions. I know one thing you've been very outspoken about is also opposing federal mandates around EV, electric vehicles, and phasing out gas-powered vehicles and restructuring the automobile industry. Talk with us about your position on that, especially as Kentucky, they're, I think, just recently the second EV charging station opened in Berea just this past week, but the plan is to have 48 of those stations across Kentucky when the whole project is done, and $33 million in federal aid in that. So where do you stand on that?
Well, where I stand is that we have to have ultimately an energy landscape that applies to and allows for renewables. It allows for the strong continuation of fossil fuels, coal and natural gas. Look, that is why Kentucky, there's no secret why these battery plants are coming to Kentucky. It's because we have low-cost, reliable energy in the form of coal and natural gas. And so we have to maintain that. We have to maintain that competitive advantage. And so I appreciate what the Trump administration has done to say, hey, we are no longer going to look at fossil fuels as a boogeyman. We are going to support fossil fuels. And I appreciate and applaud the Trump administration for doing that. As Attorney General, again, I have a track record of standing up and opposing ESG because, again, here in Kentucky, look, there's a lot of coal that flows down barges that go down into West Kentucky. We've got to maintain, because it gives our people jobs, and we need to. And look, we also need to explore, as I've said, nuclear. There's opportunities perhaps in West Kentucky for nuclear. Again, we have to have an across-the-board energy strategy, and Kentucky can lead the way on that. But we have to vitally maintain coal and natural gas.
I know that you've shared that obviously you were all in on President Trump's America First agenda as a Republican candidate for U.S. Senate. How do you court, or are you interested in courting Democrats and also independents who may still want to know more about you and your candidacy, or are you more focused on President Trump and courting the Republican side of the party?
Well, I think anybody that runs in a Republican primary has to do a good job of communicating and articulate visions and values to folks in the Republican Party in that primary. But even deeper than that, I think these issues that we're talking about, whether it's the issue of energy, whether it's the issue of inflation, whether it's the issue of issues at our southern border, Those are things that resonate regardless of what your political affiliation is. That's why so many people in Kentucky voted for President Trump. I imagine there were a lot of Democrats that voted for President Trump because of his America First agenda, an agenda that is going to look out for the working men and women of this Commonwealth. And as the next senator from Kentucky, I want to support him in that effort. Again, to help the working men and women of Kentucky, to make sure that you're secure in your home, to make sure that we are maintaining our energy independence and our competitive advantage on that front, and to secure our southern border. These are all things that, regardless of what your political affiliation is, I think you can support.
And when you ran for governor back in 2023, at that time in the Republican primary, there were a total of 12 candidates, including yourself, but 4 or 5 that obviously were the top of that race. But are you envisioning for this Republican primary a wide range of other competitors as well, or do you think that you stand alone at the top, in your opinion?
Mario, I certainly believe I stand alone at the top, but I suspect others will get in this race. But look, at the end of the day, I feel very strongly about our ability, or my ability, to go to Washington and articulate values that are consistent with the folks all across this Commonwealth, regardless of where you find yourself in terms of political designation. At the end of the day, Kentuckians want somebody that's going to speak strongly for standing up for your values. People want somebody that's going to help them when it comes to easing inflation. They want somebody that's going to help them when it comes to securing the southern border. And as I've articulated, I will be that leader. I will be that voice for the folks all across this Commonwealth that care deeply about those issues.
And you've been endorsed on more than one occasion from Donald Trump in your candidacy for office. Do you anticipate receiving a Trump endorsement once again?
I sure hope so. But again, this is a race that is about me trying to articulate my vision to folks all across this Commonwealth. And I'm sure hopeful that President Trump will endorse my campaign again. I've supported him and he's had my back in previous elections. And I'm hopeful that he'll support me again. But at the end of the day, this is about a senator from Kentucky going to Washington and standing up for that America First agenda and the values of Kentucky, and I will do that.
Well, Daniel Cameron, I really appreciate your time as always and sharing your vision for your campaign, but also why you're wanting to be the next senator representing Kentucky in our nation's capital.
Thank you, Mario. Always great to be with you. God bless you.